Hi, this is international psychic medium Susan Schueler. Welcome to my show, Midlife Conversations. Today's guest is Tammy Schueler. Hi, Tammy, welcome.
Oh, hi, Susan.
Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. Today's topic is going to be a challenging one, and I'm really glad that you were brave enough to be on the show. Today, we're going to be talking about the loss of a child through death. And this is a topic I think parents don't even like to hear about because it brings up so many terrifying emotions. So, like I said, Tammy, thank you for being brave and being here with us today because you have gone through this. So, if I can just ask, did you always want to have children? Did you think you would have children?
No, I was the exception to the rule. I never dreamed I would get married. I never thought about having children. I actually always thought I would be the complete opposite. And as luck would have had it, I found myself pregnant. I found out the day, 2 days before my 30th birthday. Single lady, pregnant, turning 30, absolute meltdown.
Wow.
And I had thought about several different things. You know, you have your options. You could have your abortion. You can have the adoption. You can tell the father. You could, I mean, the options are endless. And I thought, well, somebody was trying to tell me I was meant to have a child because her father had tried to have children with other women before, and he had a very low sperm count and was told he could never have children. So I took this as a message that I was definitely meant to have this child and be this child's mother. So I pursued from there. And yes, I did tell her father that he was going to have a baby.
Wow. Okay. So that was like a major unexpected change, I'm sure, in your life. That's sort of like, I wasn't planning on this. So let me just ask you. So after you have your daughter, can you just describe her a little bit when she was a little girl?
Uh, it's funny because I just don't have the memories like a lot of people have. But as far as her being a little girl, she was happy. And it's funny because people will talk about as she got older, she was diagnosed with acid reflux, and they always talk about how babies are so throw uppy and sick all the time when they have this disease. And she wasn't. I never saw the child get sick. It was so unusual. She was just a happy child and very flexible. Oh my goodness, she could adapt to anything like that.
And it's funny too. I don't know if our viewers have noticed this or not. Clearly, Tammy and I look alike, and our names are the last. Our last names are the same. So she is my older sister. So I do know the person she's talking about, my niece Allie. And so I'm going to add to this a little bit. She was a very quirky, fun, outgoing little kid. Very, very full of life, tons of energy. So she was kind of like a trippy little kid to be with. Also, the one thing that I want to point out that I've noticed is and she was an only child. Kids who are only children do tend to be like more mature. It's like they grow
Oh,
up quicker, maybe just because they're used to hanging out with adults more often. But yeah, so I definitely remember her being that way. So how did she like, what were some challenges as she grew and you were a single mom? As she grew, or some challenges and things that you had to kind of deal with that she kind of had to deal with?
well, there were a lot of them. First off, when she was first born, I was in the restaurant business, so I was working nights, waiting tables, things like that. So she would go to the babysitter's house and be picked up at 10, 11 o'clock at night and off to bed. And she would wake up in the morning and I'd still be asleep. And there was, I mean, it was that in itself was a tough one, just adjusting to that. As she got older, I got back into truck driving. Thank God mom was there to take care of her for several days a week while I'd be out on the road. But there were a lot of challenges.
Now I know that and I can relate to this too because I had a hard time in school. And to me, especially as an educator, I understand this now. Creatives tend to learn differently. And I do know that Allie had some challenges in school, right?
Oh, absolutely. She struggled. I mean, she always put forth the effort. We had her into the Huntington Learning Center, and it was like, I mean, she struggled. But the funniest thing was every time I go to a school meeting or something like that, it was like her grades aren't good, but she's the most likable, lovable. Oh, they've got some stories to tell me about what a wonderful human being she was, just not the best student.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned, very creative. I mean, she would make like little outfits. I remember her making shoes out of duct tape. I mean, she was just always in a different plane. That's the best way I can put it.
When she would stay at mom had all those old window treatments in the basement, and she would cut it up and she would make dresses and play suits out of the old window treatments like she was one of the Von Trapp kids.
Oh Lord, too funny. Now I do know that her father was in her life, but can you just talk about the dynamics that she had between she and her dad and kind of how that affected her as well?
When she was young, obviously the relationship was a little bit easier. As she got older, it got a little strained. She saw things one way, he saw them another, and of course I had to stick my 2 cents in there and see them yet another way. So there challenges, to say the least.
So what did you notice now as Ellie got older and grew into more of her teenage years? How did you notice things kind of change a little bit for her?
Just not fitting in. She was always desperate to have friends, to have that close camaraderie, and she just never really had that. In middle school, it caught on a little more as she hit high school because it was okay to be a little different. But that was one thing. She was different. She did not fit in, but she did not conform. She heard her different drum. That's what she marched to, and she stayed true to herself rather than conforming to what society thought she should have been.
Absolutely. And I remember having a conversation with her one time about, sometimes this is the way that you can fit in. This is how you have to do it. And it killed me to say it to her. And I just remember her looking at me. She's like, but that's okay if they don't like me. And she seriously meant it. And I was like, God, I would not. God bless you, because you're a stronger little person than I would have been at that age.
Right.
Yeah, so she was definitely yeah, and I know that she did, and I remember having like conversations with her on the phone because you do live in a different state that I live in, and you guys would come out and visit and things like that. So I definitely had a good relationship with her, but having conversations where there was depression, there was sadness, and I know what was it that made you decide to get her in to see a counselor?
I found out she was cutting herself,
Yeah, and
and that
just for our viewers, that's not, I mean, especially me as a teacher, that's not as uncommon as you would think. So when you got her into therapy, did that kind of help for a while? What happened?
oh, absolutely. They had uh she was going to a group. She had to see a psychiatrist one day a month. But she was going to a therapist there who they just had the most incredible relationship. And it was like almost instantly you could see how this helped her. And they put her on medication for a while, and then weaned her off of that. So she was off the medication. I want to say maybe less than a year after starting to see the therapist and the psychiatrist. And even after she died, the psychiatrist sent flowers to the funeral home.
Oh wow, yeah. That's the beautiful part, and we'll get into the actual passing in a second. But that's the beautiful part of Allie is posthumously after her passing, she's truly made such an amazing impact in so many different ways, and we will get into that. So switching gears a little bit to talk about something that I'm sure is very uncomfortable. If you could just tell the audience about that July night in 2011 and what exactly happened.
Well, I can start with, I was driving home from work, again, tending bar. It was probably 10:30, 11 o'clock on a Friday night. And I was driving past the pizzeria where she had worked. And I thought, geez, I should pop in and see if she needs a ride home. And I thought, oh no, it's 11 o'clock. She's left by now. And she was not living with me at the time. 6 weeks prior to her death, she had moved in with her dad. So I thought I'll just go home. So I went home and I went to bed, and it was probably one o'clock in the morning, and I heard a noise, and it was confusing. I just worked a 12-hour day. I was exhausted. I was in bed, and all of a sudden I could realize it was somebody outside my bedroom window. So I went and I opened the window. I said, is someone out there? And they're like, it's the Amherst Police Department. Can you please come down? And you can just imagine the terror that rips through your body at that point. I ran downstairs, I threw the door open, and I'm like, oh, please, please tell me everybody's okay. Please tell me everybody's okay. And they said, please come inside and sit down. And you just knew what
Oh
was coming.
God.
I never thought it was my daughter. I didn't know what I thought, but I never thought it was my daughter. And when they told me that she was struck by a car, and it's just, you can't even think. I started pacing like a caged animal. You know, it was like, what do you do? Then they told me that she was dead. They didn't know anything, and they were going to take me to the hospital. And so then the female police officer goes upstairs to my bedroom with me while I dress. I mean, they want to make sure you're not going to do anything drastic. So there I am standing, changing my clothes in front of a stranger, getting into the police car, going to the hospital, thinking, am I going to drive past the crash? I don't know where the crash is. I don't know what happened. I don't know anything. It just,
Now, did
so
you
surreal.
call anybody? I mean, here you are all alone.
Yeah. No, I was just going to the hospital. That's all I knew to do. I had to get to where she was, whether she was alive or dead. I had to be there. When I got there, her father was already there. Which again, he and I had it's been a rough relationship over the years, but we still shared the daughter. So, I mean, thank God he was there.
So, okay, so you're there. Do you see her?
Yeah. They had cleaned her up, and she was on a gurney, covered up to here. And just her white face is all I could see. And I just stood there crying. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to kiss her. I was afraid I was going to break her. And again, I still didn't even know what happened at this point. I just knew nothing.
Okay, so I'm sure that point, and I know I got the call the next morning, and it's you. My initial reaction when the phone rang at 6 a.m., I picked it up and I just said, is mom dead? Because I expect older folks to pass.
Right.
And when you just said sit down, I was like, it's not mom. And you don't expect to hear that a young person is gone. And this is something that, especially as a medium, I'm going to say 50% of the people that I read for are young. So young people die, but yet we still do not expect this. So let's push forward a little bit. When did you start finding out exactly what happened with this accident?
Well, when I left the hospital, needless to say, I didn't have a car. I didn't have anything. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go home. It was probably 3-4 o'clock in the morning. And Rich, her father, gave me a ride over to mom's house. And again, we put mom through that too, banging on her door at 4 o'clock in the morning. She comes to the door and sees Rich and me standing there. She had to be like, just beyond able to comprehend what was going on. And as I told her what happened, then Rich left and mom and I stayed there and we sat up talking all night. Never occurred to me to listen to the news or to see what was going on. And I don't even remember how it occurred to me to turn the new. Oh, that's what it was. I had to call Yvonne. I wanted to make sure she knew what was going on before she got to work. Yvonne being our older sister. And I wanted to make sure she knew what was going on, not walking into work and hearing it on the news as we were finding out. And that's when they were saying that it was a doctor that had hit her and that he was coming from a martini party, and all this stuff was starting to come out. And
I would like to interject here. He hit her and drove away.
Absolutely. So yeah, well, we'll get into that, won't we? I got calls from people I knew that their granddaughter worked at the country club and had some inside information that wasn't coming out. They wanted to make sure I knew this. I got calls from the police department, the news. It was, so needless to say, so we gathered up. Mom gave me a ride home. We went home and started to notify the family and whatnot as to what was going on, because it was obvious that this was going to be a big local news story, given the circumstances.
And if I may interject, Tammy's from Buffalo, New York. And this was a very prominent doctor who hit her. And he was very well known. And it became an extremely public case. And it's like, I'll mention it sometimes to people in California and they'll say, I heard about that. So it became very national in a lot of ways because it was such an atrocity. So Tammy, go ahead, tell a little bit more.
Well, do you want me to tell you about what happened? The crash?
Yes, go ahead and explain what happened.
Okay, so as it turns out, had I stopped at the pizzeria, she was still there. Evidently wasn't meant to be. I don't know. Anyway, she's a longboarder, and a longboard being a long skateboard, about 3 feet long, and she had a friend of mine, a coworker of ours, just put new wheels and bearings and stuff on the board. I had called her that morning and I said, your deck is ready. Come on and pick it up. So she swung by work, picked up her deck. She was so excited. She got to longboard to work that night. Normally the guy who gives her a ride home had the night off. So she wound up longboarding back home. She wasn't a half a mile from the pizzeria where she was struck and killed. She was on the right side of the road between the white line and the curb, which is over a car length width. It's a well-lit street. The gouge in the road shows where she was hit, and she was almost dead center in that curb lane. He had evidently crossed the white line into the curb lane, hit her, tore off his passenger side mirror, so it's not like he didn't know he hit something.
Well, also when they showed the car in the it wasn't a Mercedes or a BMW. This was a
BMW.
Car. Okay, so BMW, but it also didn't it like crash in the right?
Yes, there was a dent in the hood as well. There, the fender as well. So definitely damage to the car. He never slowed down. He never stopped. He didn't do anything. And this was less than a mile from his house. He was proceeding home from what I later found out was Martinis on the Green golf outing.
That had started in the early afternoon, 5, 6 o'clock?
Correct. And this was 11. I want to say it was shortly after 11 when she was struck.
Right.
So he goes home and is inspecting the vehicle, and he's a doctor, mind you, finds human flesh on the fender of his car, and his wife goes back to see what's going on. At that point, she's approached by police who are turning her around because the police were on the scene immediately because somebody else who saw her and heard the crash turned around to see what they could do and called the police and the ambulance immediately. Wow, I don't even know where to go from here. Anyway.
Hang on a second, Tammy. I'm going to interrupt you. So I just want you to pause for a second. So we're going to pause just because. Okay. So go ahead. So the wife went back to see what had happened.
And she saw the police were there, so she realized something was up and went immediately called her attorney and blah blah. Went back to the house to tell her husband what was going on. And of course, she had the opportunity to tell the police when she was there. He had the opportunity to go back, but he wanted to buy himself a little time and disappeared. Well, one of the Amherst police officers, just on a hunch, stumbled into his neighborhood, saw him and the neighbors standing out on the front porch and approached him. This is how the whole thing came to be. Well, he couldn't go much further. The doctor wound up leaving the house, going out on a walk, and evidently waiting for the attorney to show up. And finally, they did arrest him. I want to say it was quite early in the morning. So
so if she was hit at 11 o'clock, they arrested him like at 5 a.m.
I think it was later than that, but by the time they arrested him, I think it was probably 7 or 8 in the morning.
Now, he would not adhere to a breathalyzer test?
Breathalyzer, correct.
Okay, so what, did they take blood?
They did, but by that time, I mean, he was still legally drunk at that time, but that a lot of time had passed.
Okay, but he was still legally drunk. What is that, 7 hours after the hit?
You know, don't quote me on that. I'm not. I know there was blood. There was definitely a blood alcohol count, but I don't recall what the count was.
Okay, I thought it was over the legal limit. That I do remember.
I think it was.
Okay. So now I just want to let it be known that he was up for 5 federal counts, correct?
Felony
counts. So what were those 5 felony counts that he was up for?
Tampering with evidence.
Because he tried to wipe off the headlights.
Yes. Leaving the scene of a crash where an injury or a death was involved. Driving under the influence.
He was speeding.
I don't think they weren't able to charge him with that.
Oh, weren't they? What about the texting?
I don't think they were able to charge him with that either. I'm drawing a blank, Susan. I cannot remember what the five.
But I do know it was 5 felonies. Okay, so let's push forward. Was he convicted? What happened?
He got convicted of misdemeanor DWI. It was not DWI. It was driving under the influence which is considered a misdemeanor. He was found not guilty of all 5 felony counts, which was
with the, leaving the scene of a fatality. Yeah. How did he get out of that one?
He said he didn't know he hit a person.
What did he think he hit?
Oh, he didn't know. Obviously didn't care enough to stop and see.
Right.
And again, even when he went home, he had the chance to do the right thing and chose not to. But by the time he realized the police were already there, you know, they had figured it out, and he had to come forward at that point. So.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Okay, so now the legal outcome of this, of course, was devastating for not just us as a family, but it was pretty devastating for the entire, I'm going to say the whole Buffalo area, because it just felt like if you've got money to pay for a good lawyer, you can get out of a crime.
That's absolutely what it was.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us were just very disgusted with the legal system, disgusted with people in their view of like reasonable doubt. You know,
one of the jurors crashed his car into a parked car on the street while on the jury and was arrested. Talk about a jury of your peers. I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely outrageous.
Yeah. So I know that, I mean, it's horrible enough to lose a child, horrible enough. But then to have all of this injustice kind of woven throughout that, I have to ask you, how did your faith change after this happened? And I know so many parents go through this. Why wasn't I taken? I would be happy to go. And then you go through the whole woulda, shoulda, coulda, like what you just said about, had I stopped at the pizzeria, you know, or, you know, there's so many different, but you know, and there's no rhyme or reason, you know, when people say, oh, all things happen for a reason. No, there's no rhyme or reason for something like this. So when we look at this, how did your faith change, if at all? I mean, and also kind of how did you choose to live your life a little? I mean, do you live your life differently because of this?
Well, that's a lot of stuff to answer right there.
Okay, so let's start with, did it affect your faith?
I don't know if it affected my faith. It affected me more as a person than my faith. The whole community got to know my daughter, which only a handful of people would have ever got to know her had she have lived. She probably had more influence and more impact on more lives by dying than if she would have lived. perhaps that was her purpose. Perhaps that was why she was given to me and a man who couldn't have children.
And isn't
Maybe
that,
that's why.
and honestly, that's amazing to me to hear you say that, because that is such an amazing outlook. You know, I mean, that's wow, Tammy, that's pretty powerful that you just said that. That's pretty powerful. Now, I want to bring up one thing that's a cute little story that you and Ellie used to come out and visit me in California all the time. There was one visit that I want to say Ellie was maybe 8 years old. You were driving a truck, you were working in the restaurant business at the time, and we were down on the boardwalk at the Venice Boardwalk, and we walked by a tarot reader. And I said, "Oh, Tammy, get your cards read. This will be fun. Get your cards read." So we sat down, you got your cards read, and she was pretty good. You know what I mean? She pretty much picked you up. But then she went on to say that she could see in the future that you were going to be a motivational speaker. And you and I both looked at each other, and I remember thinking to myself, she's talking about me and I'm sitting next to her and she's picking up my energy. And because you were not the type, like even to do something like this, what we're doing right now, that was not you.
I would have ripped my own hair out of my head rather than stand up in front of my classroom and go to the board to do a math problem.
Exactly. So
I'm just terrified of speaking.
And it's funny because I know who this psychic is now, and she's a good psychic, but and she's been working down there, I think, for 35, 40 years. But when we walked away and we were like, "Oh my God, that was horrible. That's so not you." Well, push forward 12 years or so. And how did you take this really horrible situation and put more of a positive spin on it?
Opportunity presented itself. It started by the victim advocate from the district attorney's office. I absolutely fell in love with this man. He was just kind and wonderful, and he helped me work on my presentation, because you're in court, you're allowed to speak to the person who's being convicted when they are convicted, and he kind of gave me ideas on how to put that together. And after the criminal case was over, he had asked me if I would be willing to come and speak on a victims impact panel. And what that is a panel that's put together of 3 to 4 people who have all been victims of DWI. And we present our stories to a courtroom full of people, first-time offenders who have been arrested for DWI, so that they can see it goes a little deeper than the inconvenience of them getting caught driving under the influence. And a lot of people come into the courtroom and they're kind of annoyed. They don't want to be there. "Oh, what kind of crap are you going to feed me now?" And each one of us tells our story. And we've got offenders there. We've got people who have been offenders that are telling their story. We've got people like myself who lost a child. There's another woman who her daughter is permanently damaged from a hit and run DWI. And we each tell our story in our own way. And by the time these people leave the courtroom, they come up to us shaking our hands saying, "Thank you so much. I get to look at this from a different angle." So I'm able to take the most awful thing in my life and maybe turn it around so that somebody does not stick the keys in the ignition one more time. Then on prom, when it gets to be prom season, we, the Victims Impact Panel, go to high schools and we talk to the students and tell them about the dangers of drugs and alcohol. And if they can actually relate, this is an 18-year-old child that died, so they can relate to this 18-year-old. And here I am standing in an auditorium full of 200 people, telling them my story, tears running down my face. Who'd have thought?
And that's, honestly, I just have to share this about you. Tammy was such an introvert, not shy, but just didn't want to go make herself be publicly seen, that when we were kids and we were at a department store, she would make me, who was 3 years younger than her, go ask for help. She just didn't. So, I mean, honestly, I can't tell you what a huge thing this is for her to be doing and how that just changed. The thing that we've also not mentioned is a lot of people stepped forward in the community of Buffalo, and they actually built a skate park in the name of my niece, the Alex Rice Peace Park. I mean, how were you approached by that? I forget.
It was John Fulcher, one of the members of the community, had come up to me the first time we did a memorial walk, and he said, I just want to do something. You were just, it's so wrong. It's so tragic. The whole, the community is heartbroken over this. So he put together this Rockin' for Rice, and it was just local musicians groups. And we had this great picnic out in Bassett Park, and we got talking, and I met the people who own Fat Man, the skateboard shop, and we just decided, why don't we do this? What's to prevent us from doing this? And it took us 7 years and a lot of kicks in the teeth and whatnot, but we now have a 10,000 square foot state-of-the-art skate park in Amherst, the first one of its kind in Western New York, the Alex Rice Peace Park. I couldn't be more proud of the work we did.
And you also got stuff from Tony Hawk's Foundation, didn't you?
Tony Hawk gave us a $7,500 grant for it. We got grants from New York State. We raised a lot of money locally. We got a lot of in-kind donations. In total, this skate park cost us over $500,000.
Wow. And it's a great skate park. I was there for its opening. It's really cool. I mean, it is very state of the art. And it's so funny too, because Allie, like I said, she actually bought her board that she passed on out here at the boardwalk, didn't she?
She did that. Yes.
Yeah.
The last summer we were there.
Exactly. And I remember just standing at the skate park at Venice, and she just so loved that. And years later, I think we took some of her ashes over that way, didn't we?
We did. They're scattered at the Venice skate park.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the beautiful part too, is she loved to travel. And you and I have been to India together, and we put some in the Ganges River. I mean, and I love the fact that she would have loved that, just absolutely loved it. But I know she would have adored the skate park. So now I have to ask you this, too, because I know I've experienced some of these things with you. As a medium, I know that Spirit sends us so many signs. And in so many different ways. So can you just tell us a couple of the ways that Allie has told you that she's near you, so you kind of know? And I mean, it's interesting because I'm a medium and I'm your sister. So yes, you've had connections with her often. But I know that there's other signs that she does this. So you want to just give us a couple examples?
I will give you a couple of them. We have you, our mom, and our uncles from San Francisco were all together in Vancouver a couple of years back. And we were going over to Vancouver Island, and you have to take this huge ferry where you drive your car on there. And it was pretty impressive. I don't remember what we were talking about, but we're literally on the bus getting onto the ferry, and a tractor trailer pulls up next to us, and it says Alexandria, which is my daughter's name.
And it was huge. I mean, the letters were just huge. And you and I are sitting there, and all of a sudden it just slowly drove by us, and we're both like, and that's how Spirit works. I mean, that is exactly how Spirit works.
And it was spelled absolutely correctly, which you don't see that spelling often, which is, again, a little bit unusual. So that it was like, yep, guess who's with us here?
And what else?
Another time, Alex had a huge connection for Houghton College. She used to like to go there. There was a group that they would go stay at the college. She had these dream that she would someday go there, and there's a gum tree there, and I remembered her talking about the gum tree, and it's a tree where all the kids stick their chewed gum all over it.
Oh,
she had it just struck me as such an odd thing. Well, one day I was feeling a little heartbroken and a little sad, so I thought, I know, I'm going to drive over to Houghton College and see if I can find that gum tree. Well, as I'm driving around looking for the gum tree, Kokomo is playing on my my iPod, which Kokomo is the song I would sing to her when she was a little baby, and I'd be jumping her, trying to, after I fed her or something like that. And it starts skipping like a skipping record would skip. And it was just so totally bizarre. I'm like, what is going on? This is so weird. And I come around the corner and here comes this girl down the hill on the longboard. And I'm like, oh my God, I just burst into tears. It's
Oh,
like,
wow.
you couldn't have asked for a more, hello, here I am.
Exactly. And music is a lovely way for spirit to communicate with us, because it's like, and especially those random songs that just kind of pop where you're like, oh my God, this is, yeah. So that's lovely. Now, being that you have worked, and the one thing, okay. So what is the one thing that you would tell other parents? I mean, you always refer to this as, I now belong to the club that no one wants to belong to. And I always felt that was such a powerful way of saying that. But if you had the opportunity to talk to other parents who are experiencing this, what would you share with them?
I think the most important thing is to be able to look around and to see that you will survive it, to look at another parent who has gone through it, who has the experiences behind them. And you can look at them and say, they got through it. I'll get through it. I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch my cousin Betty do things. She was far more brave than I was, and she would go ahead and do something. I think to myself, well, if Betty can do it, I can do it. So it's that same premise. I could look at other people who have been through this and see that they've survived. And now I know somebody who's fresh into it can look at me and say, I too can survive.
Now, is that why you got yourself involved with Compassionate Friends? Just talk a little bit about that. Let people know what Compassionate Friends is.
Compassionate Friends is basically a group of people who have lost their children. And it's just a support group. And that's basically what we do. We listen to each other's. In my group, I feel like I know the children that have passed. There's just such a camaraderie. And you can break down and cry. You can say anything goes. Absolutely anything goes, just to be around people who know your pain, because their pain is the same.
And isn't that the hardest part? Because the loss of a child, doesn't matter if they're 60, the loss of a child, I don't think there is any pain that's as severe.
You know, and this may sound a little strange. The only thing I could think would be worse is having your child missing. And
There's no closure.
Yeah, and that's it. You don't get that closure. And I can't imagine the terror and the way people live sometimes years not knowing. That to me would be worse. At least I know my child's not in pain. I know.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, Tammy. I know that this is not an easy topic. We're going on this year's being her 10th year of passing. And I can't believe it's, and it's all of those anniversaries, especially the first year. I mean, I know the first Thanksgiving that we had, we actually went to Canada. We're like, okay, we're just going to do something totally different. The first year is definitely the hardest. Would you agree?
I absolutely would. And I would love to share a thought that just popped into my head right now. I just lost it.
Welcome to midlife.
It has to do with everybody grieves differently. And in Compassionate Friends, I've got to see how different people grieve and how husbands and wives don't always agree on the grieving process, and how you're often judged by how you choose to grieve. And men, my heart breaks for you, because a lot of times you're expected to be stronger than the women, which is absolutely, utterly ridiculous. But I've got so many close people in my life. And if I could give any advice to somebody who's lost a child, it's push yourself to breathe, push yourself to get on with your life, to do exercise, to see what you can do to make somebody else's life better, because that will make you a stronger person. It's the people who can't get out of themselves and wallow that suffer endlessly. I watch people grow. I watch them move on. I'm so proud of them. And then I see other people who can't. They turn to drugs. They turn to alcohol. They ruin their own life. I think to myself, I could not imagine my daughter looking down on me and not being prouder of who I've become through her loss.
And honestly, that to me, Tammy, is so powerful, because that says like her passing was not in vain. Her passing, like what you're saying, posthumously, she's done more than she may have ever been able to do in life. I mean, she's affected so many people, and it just shows how powerful we are and how much we can help each other.
Right. We don't know what our purpose is. All we can do is take what we're given and make the best that we can out of it. I don't know what her purpose was. I don't know what my purpose is, but I'm doing the best I can.
Absolutely. And you're making proper use of who you are. Tammy, I love that. So I'm just going to thank you so much for being on our show, Midlife Conversations. Once again, this is psychic medium Susan Schueler. And I just want you to all remember, we are all one. Thank you. And until next time, have a great day.
Thank you.